Volume 5 C12. Naya's face was swollen. Pain thudded through it. It was still worth it, she thought to herself when she recalled the stupefied face of Remedios Custodio when Naya waved from the back of the wagon. Now she had chains on her wrists secured in front of herself, and the commander of the Paladin Order had been fuming for days over being made to look foolish. My face didn't help. Most of them would just toss me food, and not very well either. Naya acknowledged the unending truth that her face looked filled with hate and loathing for whomever was looking at her, but for the moment at least she was past lamenting it. There was no real reason to lament anything. You knew the price you'd pay the moment you lowered your bow, now you're going to pay it. The unutterable sorrow and fear in that broken dragon's eyes, the sense of absolute loss, she still could not help but pity it. I made the right choice. She knew that much. The wagon was still rolling and rocking underneath her, and now there was only one real fear left. If my mother and father are stationed here, what will I say to them? Will they understand? Will they forgive me? Naya had no idea, but that question haunted her at every waking and every sleeping hour. But every now and then, she turned her thoughts to her patient, her partner, her friend. He got away at least, hopefully he is alive and this wasn't all for nothing. That was an ugly thought, though she didn't regret saving his life. Even now that she was facing the price, the idea that it was all for nothing was like the taste of ashes on her tongue. All the stale bread and lukewarm water in the world couldn't have gotten rid of that taste. Outside, Remedios was shouting. Remedios Custodio here with a prisoner, Naya Baraha, traitor and collaborator. Low rumbling anger pierced the fabric of her confinement, and a moment later the draped tan fabric overhead was yanked away with a flourish to leave her exposed in full view. Boo! Judgment came down on her from the stone walls. More than a few echoed it, some in uniform, some in work clothes, but the words traitor and collaborator were muttered with great loathing, and a rotten tomato struck her in the face from above. It hit her swollen cheek with a wet splat and the flattened remnant landed on the wooden cart. Shut up, Naya bellowed and turned her eyes up to the wall. Shut up. I'm no traitor. I'm no collaborator. I protected this country, you bastards. The injustice got to her and vitriol poured out of her mouth. She shot to her feet, rattling her chains. I hunted the wilds, slew the demi-humans you incompetents let slip through. I lived and did my job while you sit here guarding against an invasion you pray will never happen while I fight the invasions that do. Go to hell. I just did what I thought was right. How dare you all judge me for it? A heavy blow to the back of her head sent her falling to her face, but her fearsome stare had reached them even if her words had not. As she slipped into unconsciousness, she heard a few muttering, "Put down the monster." She woke up hours later in a stone cell, a pile of straw and a moldy blanket tossed nearby. Her uniform and armor were long gone, instead she wore what amounted to nothing more than a sack and some chains. The stone was cold under her feet and she could see the moon through the bars on the high window. The breeze was slowly cooling. It'll be autumn soon. I've always liked autumn. Naya reflected and sat on the floor, drawing her knees up to her chest. She touched her cheek. The bruise was gone. Somebody had healed her while she was unconscious. The stone at her back was as hard as it was cool. She wrapped her arms around her knees and stared at the other wall without really seeing it. Hours passed alone in the dim and the dark and the dank. A wooden bowl of water that had a wet piece of bread soaking in it sat nearby. She had no interest in it. But her ears took everything in. And that was why she heard the door and a pair of voices whispering harsh words to a guard. It clinked open, then shut, and swift, heavy feet approached. Why am I surprised? Naya asked herself when she heard them drawing near. She saw them out of the corner of her eye. Even in the dim light of a distant moon she couldn't have failed to know them. But they had the added benefit of a torch which they stuck onto a sconce on the opposite wall and grabbed the bars as soon as they came close. They clanged with the mailed fists striking at them, and Naya scrambled to her feet to rush the bars herself. "Mom! Dad!" she shouted and stuck her hands through the bars. They drew closer, allowing her arms to hug around the backs of their heads and put their arms around her at her back. "You came," Naya exclaimed, and when the embrace broke, she stood, as did they, and she wiped her fearsome eyes of previously unshed tears. "Of course we did," her father said, looking down at her with eyes like those of his daughter. "How could you think we wouldn't?" her mother said with a fragile smile on her face. "You're our daughter. No matter what. Of course we would come. But tell us, is it true?" Please, just tell us the truth. Her father implored, his hands folded into Naya's own. The metal between his fingers and her flesh was not enough to keep back all warmth, and Naya savored what she felt. I'm not a traitor. I'm not a collaborator. Naya swore. I promise, I swear on the gods. Yes. Yes, I spared some demi-humans, and a dragon too. That much. I don't deny it. But they were hurt. They were helpless. Just little ones calling for their mothers and fathers. They're no different from us, and Naya didn't lower her head. She felt no shame. Instead she leveled her eyes at them both. I did what I thought was right, every time. That's all. A dragon, though? Her father asked. He was broken, in pain. He asked for help. Helping the weak is common sense, isn't it? Isn't that what you taught me? Help the weak. Be brave. Isn't that what a paladin is supposed to do? Naya exclaimed and shook the bars until they rattled and dust came down. For humans, to protect humanity. Her mother approached her. How could you help those creatures? I'm a creature to most humans, mother. Naya reminded her, and her mother and father both reared back as if they'd been slapped. Take a good look at me. A good, long look at me. What do you see? Naya demanded of them both, her face caught in the light of the flame. Shadows danced around her evil unblinking stare. My daughter. Her father said, a daughter I've always been proud of. Naya bit her lip but said nothing even as her heart broke at his words. By all the gods. I never really realized just how much like your father you really look. Her mother said and put a hand on Naya's face. She ran a thumb around the shape of one of Naya's eyes, and Naya nodded. If I'd been born a man, maybe this fierce look would be admired, respected, but as a woman? It made me ugly, it made me look spiteful, cruel, evil. One look at me and I'm judged badly before I say a word or do anything at all. I'm sorry, Dad. It isn't your fault, Naya said and took his hand, removed his armored glove and kissed the top of his hand. But I never ever fit in anywhere. So of course I took pity on broken things. They're no different than I am. Demi-humans, dragons, they're people too. We live the same, bleed the same, die the same. I don't hate them as much as I'm hated by the people who sent me out to die. Naya, I didn't know. They didn't tell us you were getting sent out to the wilds. Her father said, a shimmering in his eyes was matched by that of his wife. We'd have done something if we'd known. Done what? Sent some other unfortunate to die in my stead? I made my choice, and I survived out there. You have no idea how often demi-humans actually got around your walls one way or another over the years. I hunted so many to their ends, using every trick in my arsenal, and now look what I get for it. Another month and we might have even had a dragon ally to guard the wilds, but that's over now. And who will they send in my stead, huh? Some unprepared fool they want dead. That's our order. Our order wanted me dead and sent me out there to die. Now I'm being slandered and executed for how I survived. Naya spat in the stone. I'm glad that uniform is gone. You were both right, it never suited me. Naya, my daughter, my precious girl. I'm sorry we weren't there for you. I'm sorry. But we're here now. Her mother insisted and reached through the bars, drawing her daughter as close to her as she could. We'll get the best defense we can for you. We won't just let you be killed. I don't agree with what you've done. But you've always been different. Different than me, different than your father. Different from everyone else, and I'm so sorry I never understood that. Her mother said and slid her shaking hands up Naya's sides to run her hands through her daughter's golden hair. We'll do something, think of something. Maybe we can get it knocked down to her mother stopped when Naya put a finger to her mother's lips. Dishonorable discharge? Thrown out like trash? Take away my honor, my pride, shame our family name? Naya asked quietly. At least you'd be alive. Her father said, I have only one child, and you can't be replaced. I know I was distant, but not because I wanted to be. I always thought we could make up for lost time, but if you die we lose it all. There won't be any more time, I'll never see what kind of woman you become. I'd rather die in your stead, he whispered roughly, his teeth ground as he looked down at the stone and spat on it in contempt. Naya stepped back from them, slowly letting their touches slip away, withdrawing from the torchlight. You've said in minutes what I've hoped for all my short life, Naya said and let her hands fall at her side. I know what they'll ask me to do. They'll ask me to recant, to publicly proclaim my hatred for demi-humans, for all non-humans. They'll ask me to express remorse, regret for every act of healing or mercy I ever gave to anyone. But I'm not sorry. I'm not, and I never will be. Frankly, I'd rather die. Naya gave a weak smile at her parents. Thank you both for coming, but I won't bend here, I won't apologize, and I will defend myself on my terms. We both know how that will go, and I'd rather not see it happen. Just do me a favor, and don't watch. Also, if it isn't too much trouble, slit my throat that night so I don't suffer for too long. I love you both, now please. Just go. She wiped her eyes again as her parents reached through the bars to her again. Remember me as I am, and that I died bravely. For any way I failed you, I'm sorry, and I'm sorry for making you suffer now. I love you both, Naya said, and stepped back to the far wall where she took up her moldy blanket and wrapped it around her shoulders. Go, she said, and their arms fell away from their grasping stretch to hang limp instead. I was never not proud of you. Neither of us were ever anything but proud of you. But we just thought you should have done something different. Her mother said, and her father nodded in agreement. I know. Maybe you were right, but so much for that. I'm tired, I'm going to get some rest. I'll see you at the trial. I love you, she said, and watched as they left her alone. When the door closed out of sight, Naya grimaced, kicked over the bowl of water and drenched bread to see the bowl shatter into splinters at the wall and the contents fall with a splash and wet plop to the stone floor. She then lay down on the old straw, curled up, and tried very hard to fall asleep. Volume 5 C13. Having someone attend personally to bathing her proved to be more than pleasurable, and the slave in her service proved adept at her task. More than that, Ileana seemed to know more about the bedroom arts than anyone that the guardian overseer had ever heard of. How to set shy men at ease, how to entice them to talk about themselves and guide them into revealing what they liked or didn't like. When to be direct and when to be subtle. The elf poured out a wealth of knowledge over the overseer that was matched by some instances of role-playing as Albedo talked about her beloved Ainz. It led to Ileana eventually asking, is he an actual god? Can he really do all that you say? This isn't a trick to mock a lowly whore, mistress? To that Albedo could only laugh. He is a god of gods, he and his many friends. They once hunted gods like the human Six for pleasure and trophies, and he will someday extend his power and majesty over the whole of this world. And yet, he's also shy because he so fears letting us down, making us sad, or worrying that we might get hurt. He's my love, I was designed to love him, it was put into me, created as much as my beating heart. If only I could help him see. Ileana gave a sympathetic nod. Love can be a difficult thing, mistress, and no love is harder to endure than that between a servant and the one they serve. The danger is highest for the most powerless, but as you're powerful, treasured, and he already loves you, you may succeed. I wish you well, and I'll tell you what I can. Conversations like that were common, and lengthy, with Albedo drawing out every ounce of knowledge from the practiced courtesan in between their outings where Albedo learned the intimate layout of the entire city. The cries of pain, the public auctions, she breezed past them with utter indifference, but they did offer a useful tool in principle that she didn't even have to do any work for. And the precise, orderly nature of the city would make it even easier. It was on one of these outings that Albedo took note of the sewers, but somehow the lake itself she knew was largely very clean. This prompted her to ask Ileana a question: if all of the waste of the city ends up in the sewers, how is it that the lake is so clean? Mistress, the sewers don't lead to the lake, Ileana explained as she scurried beside her lady. Newly acquired slaves are set to sewer duty and public works until their sale, and I was down there once. The lake isn't where the river ends, the river runs beneath the city, and once on a journey with someone who rented me as entertainment for a trip, I saw the refuse and waste enter the sea. The river resurfaces at some point and it all washes out into the world's ocean. Marvelous. Albedo replied and stopped in her tracks. We're going back to my room, slave. I've now gotten everything I need. Albedo walked unmolested past guards and citizens alike, in her radiant disguise with her silky hair hanging down, her expensive green and black outfit. The only thing that would have done more to scream wealth was if she rode a stallion through the city. Yet though she drew appreciative looks enough that even those busy beating offenders stopped to stare with want at the sultry beauty who walked like a goddess among mortals, she barely deigned to notice them at all. Back at the hotel, Albedo wasted no time. More than 3 months of work, Her doppelganger agents from city to city were corrupting the incorruptible. The population was losing faith in their judges, and there were increasing numbers of people turning to acts of violence instead of the law to avenge themselves. Grifting was slowly filtering back to Nazarick, boosting the national revenue, and now she had what she needed here. She led Ileana into what passed for a luxurious hotel room and pointed to the middle of the room. "Go, stand there," Albedo commanded, and the elf obeyed. "Strip off your clothes, slave." Albedo gave the order, and Ileana did as she was bade. Clad in what passed for concubine labor clothing, the high-class whore apparel was silk for the sake of whoever might touch her other than for her own comfort. But it was an opaque blue that matched her eyes, done as a single double wrap that slit at the thighs, which barely covered her below the waist, and exposed her belly and contained her breasts only if she was careful how she moved. Only a pair of straps at the shoulder kept it on at all, and so commanded to remove it, she pushed the straps away and the fabric crumpled to the floor in a heap. She stepped out of them and kicked them away. I'd begun to think she had no interest in her own sex. I suppose it was inevitable though. Nobody stays in this place unless they want skills like mine. She was resigned to what she considered to be a head, but knowing this woman was at the least an enemy of this city, a vicious gratitude settled in her gut. My reward, another day of life. But what I wouldn't give, even life itself, if I could watch this city burn. "Get on your knees," Albedo commanded, and Ileana again obeyed. "Do not move an eyelash. I will return." Albedo gave the imperious order. Ileana immediately disobeyed and dropped open her mouth when she saw, of all things, a hole open up in the air, a whirling vortex of shadows and purple lightning. Albedo stepped into the shadow and was gone. It shut behind her, leaving Ileana to stare at the space and wonder, am I deluded? Have I been fucked to madness? Has any of these last few weeks been real at all? Is this all some kind of a dream? Her life passed before her eyes, and yet for all her shaking anxiety at the display of magic, the elf intuitively knew this was beyond the ability of any mortal she ever heard of. Ileana remained on her knees. What her mistress was doing, where she'd gone, the elf could think of no answer. Even asking the question begat more questions on top of the last questions until her blonde head was left dizzy and dismayed. She blinked her eyes. Is this it? Is this all there is for me? Is she coming back? If she does, anyone who can do that. Why is she even here? What was the point of having me? And if she's done, am I done too? If she is a spy, it's far more practical to just kill me to keep me silent. Another day of life. What a reward. Her bitterness and tears rose up like bile from within. I'm so tired of all this. What's the damn point, just to outlive whatever guest I'm there to service and pretend it matters? I almost don't mind dying by the hand of an enemy of this city. Though given a choice I would prefer to see it burn. Maybe the whole country, that would be nice. A land with no humans, or at least as few as possible. They breed like rats though. But what a dream that would be. Ileana was so lost in her reflections that she almost didn't notice the vortex open again until her assigned mistress emerged. "Now then," Albedo said and put a finger on Ileana's nose, "you said that as long as I was checked in at this hotel, you gave your loyalty entirely to me. You belong to me, obey me, no one else. Am I wrong?" Ileana felt the chill in the beautiful womanly voice, and so the elf swallowed hard. "Yes, my lady. As long as you are listed here, I am yours to do with as you please. But there is a fine if you kill or mutilate me. The owner. His policy is, you break it, you buy it. The fine is very high though, so it doesn't happen to many." Ileana clamped her mouth shut to stop her rambling. The piercing blue eyes she stared into began to change and a smile formed over the woman's face. Perfect. The blue became gold, the round irises became vertical. "Then now, it's time to show you the truth, slave," Albedo said and glanced out the window. The sun was already beyond the horizon and the night was slowly covering the city again. Ileana's body froze, wings emerged from the back of her mistress, and horns from the woman's head. Her already shapely and near-perfect figure became more so. A demon. A demoness. Ileana mouthed the words, and Albedo inclined her head politely. "Not even a scream," the succubus said with a little laugh. "You are well trained." She deigned to touch the blonde hair atop the servant's head. Ileana said nothing. She could say nothing, Her eyes were transfixed on the otherworldly beauty before her eyes, from the ample bosoms that could only belong to some ancient fertility goddess, to her lantern-like glowing eyes and even the soft-looking dark wings at her back that fluttered like they were laughing. Everything was entrancing. The subtle scent of female pheromones affected the slender elf before she knew it. The mistress was enticing, beautiful. Though Ileana had never cared for the touch of her own sex, she knew immediately that if the succubus wanted her, I'm all hers. But Albedo had something else in mind. She reached into another void that appeared in the air, and cast something at Ileana's feet. The elf snapped her eyes down at it. It was clothing, black and white, a dress. A maid outfit? She asked rhetorically, more than a little confused. My lady, they won't sell me to you. Ileana began, and the silvery laughter of Albedo's voice cut her off, her breasts bouncing lightly with every chuckle. As long as I am checked in here, you are mine. As I'm never checking out and this hotel will simply cease to be, along with a fair part of this city, you will remain mine. Of course, my master's rules require you to choose to go with me, choose to serve me. But do you want to remain here? Albedo's laughter began and tapered off almost as fast as it began. The demon pointed down at the garment. Put that on, Ileana, and become my servant. Serve me freely in my home as my secretary and personal attendant, and no human will have you ever again. Call it a reward for your good service. My lord always insists on some form of reward for work, other than more work. Ileana's hand darted for the black and white outfit as quickly as her hands could move and began to scramble to put it on. A very wise choice, Ileana, Albedo said to the elf as the garment was affixed in place and bound the sash at her back into a bow. Now, one more thing, Albedo said, and her hands moved faster than the elf could follow. She saw only a blurring of motion, felt nothing, and then to her shock, heard the little dink noise of pieces of her metal collar falling apart and landing on the floor. You are free from humans, and will serve me hereafter. Albedo answered the wide-eyed unspoken question while the elf touched the little metal fragments with trembling hands, not daring to pick them up to look at them, lest they reform and wrap themselves around her throat again. She swallowed hard and one hand touched the part of her neck she hadn't been able to feel with her fingertips in centuries. Gladly. With my eternal gratitude, Ileana whispered like it was a prayer, then looked up at the radiant, smug-looking demoness and asked, My lady, but how will you destroy this city? And what of the slaves, the other elves? Ileana asked, wide eyes looking up at her new liege. Conveniently enough, most of your kind live in a few locations. It's relatively easy to spare those, and if they have any spines at all, they'll take advantage of the chaos to work all kinds of havoc on the humans who live here when the chance comes. Albedo answered, Now take my hand, and come watch your wish made into reality. As my lady wills it, Ileana said with breathless and violent hunger in every word. She then reached out her hand, and clasped that of the demon as the wings spread wide and she was pulled with her toward the waiting window. Volume 5 C14. Aspect of the demon, Banshee cry. Albedo used her skill, opened her mouth, and an echoing wail came from past her lips and shattered the glass out onto the grounds below. A wail of unearthly loss and despair went out, carried over the city, and from where it was heard, no laughter carried on. And for some, it would never come again. Ileana, standing close enough to be within the safe zone, still covered her ears, folding them in against her head and briefly held her eyes tight shut until the demon's quick action startled her eyes open again. Albedo carried the new maid up, holding onto the dangling elf's hand, her wings carrying her higher, higher, and higher, up far above the city. She raised the girl up by her arms so that they were eye to eye. The dangling elf was breathing hard, her stare going from the ground far below, to the golden eyes of the demon she was now bound to serve. Do you know why I am going to destroy most of this city, Ileana? Ileana's head shook rapidly back and forth. No. She eeped out. Albedo's smile was inhumanly broad, wide, wild with hunger as the scents far below carried up toward the heavens. Because even though this city of despair is sweet to my senses, it has no place in the world the Allfather wants to make. By his order, I will not kill more than I have to, but a crisis is necessary to further the ends. This city's elites, their free humans, and the elven rebels that will likely rise, combined they will throw the southern Holy Kingdom into chaos. They will plead with the north, and the north, beset with corruption of my making, will have no help to send. Thanks to you, I know where every goat of a man and sow of a woman of importance in this city lives. I know where their soldiers are, where their weapons are, and the details of their city down to the last hair on the last ball of their highest nobleman. If you wanted revenge, you're getting it now. How is that in exchange for your soul? It's yours. Ileana spat the words with the utmost sincerity. Just let me watch. Then do whatever you want with me until I'm dead, then after that, too, she urged and ignored the painfully tight hold as she hung there in the demonesque grip. Of course. As far as they're concerned, the city will just have had a very natural disaster, but it's all the same to the dead. Albedo remarked, then held out her hand and pointed toward the ground. Specializing in area of effect attacks, plus having a vast array of them at her disposal, she knew exactly what to do and plucked a rare item from her pocket dimension. At first glance it was a simple rock, a simple stone, but when she held it in her upturned palm, it began to grow. Mistress. What is that? Ileana asked of the little growing hunk of granite. A weapon of my god, my love, and his friends. The Stone of Ghoul. And refer to me as Lady Albedo from now on. The Guardian Overseer commanded, and Ileana watched with confusion as Albedo cast it toward the sky, rather than at the city itself. Her confusion vanished as quickly as it began, and dismay replaced it when her sharp elven eyes saw the stone multiply many times over. Albedo's hand remained outstretched, and then her hand came down in a violent chopping motion. The rocks came down, no longer mere stones, they were a meteor shower of stones that went down so fast that they ignited in the air, burning white as they smashed into the wealthy districts. Ironically, because the slaves slept in basements, cellars, cages, or other accommodations, they were largely spared. While those living in large rooms on upper floors were pierced, burned, or crushed. The barracks of soldiers were made of great stone, but against stones that when combined could bind even Fenrir, they may as well have been mere sand structures. They collapsed, and from many such buildings there were not even any screams. Fires caught as wood was struck and spread, the dry evening air caught sparks and carried them about, the screams, few at first, redoubled. Albedo held her hand out, and the stones vanished, replaced by the single one again, which she again cast into the air. The process of showering stones resumed, striking the middle-class district, where the stones pierced the ground to reach the sewers below, fracturing the carefully structured walls that kept the city from collapsing on the soft ground. Albedo's innate bonuses to area of effect attacks only made the damage worse, and the ground began to shake like stones jostled in a box. Ileana watched with fascinated eyes as the center of the city began to subside, and then, by the gods of elves and men, she whispered as the howls trickled down below, and a majority of the city began to cave in, falling into the dark waters of the river to be swept into the darkness, drown, and find their rest along the bottom or out to sea. Albedo repeated the strikes twice more in such rapid succession that to those down below, it seemed like one prolonged event, the screams, the pleas for divine intervention, all in vain. Far below, Ileana watched as desperate casters running through the darkness tried to use their shielding magic to stop the stones, only to be crushed or find themselves pierced when they were unable to stop such forceful impacts. The light of the fires and their loud crackle were quickly followed by the rise of smoke that closed in on the hovering pair. It's burning, the dark city burns bright at last. Wherever this one takes me, for the rest of my life, I go. My fondest wish, my deepest longing, I will give her anything she wants, anything she asks. I will work tirelessly for her until I'm ground into the dust. Ileana vowed and began to laugh, and laugh, and laugh in the midnight hour until the smoke reached them both and she began to cough. Tears ran down her eyes that were more from the sheer joy of her wish being fulfilled than from the smoke. My work is done here. We return to the Northern Holy Kingdom to check on progress, and prepare everything for the Allfather's grand entrance, Albedo said, and the gate opened far above the city. Before the worst of the chaos could begin, Albedo returned the stone to her hand and tossed Ileana through the whirling vortex. She took one last look down below, then snapped her fingers. Ah, how could I forget? She laughed at herself and dove for her hotel room. She landed on the carpet where Ileana's cast-off garment lay, picked up her bag of souvenirs, and for good measure added one final touch to her carnage. Aspect of the demon, weight of sin. The hotel began to shake and rumble. By the time she was out the window and heading toward the waiting gate, it snapped like toothpicks, leaving those within, Not even time to scream, as they understood the fate of their city was coming to them as well. There, now I've never checked out. Albedo chuckled as she passed through the gate, eager to see what state of things waited for her on the other side. Volume 5 C15. Had there been any tears left in her to shed, they would have fallen as happy ones. They love me. They actually love me. Lingering questions, doubts, and anxiety she long feared she would never see removed, all gone in one single minute. In the midst of the prison walls of stone and bars, with no window she could touch, her heart still sang. Naya knew as well as anybody what the purpose was behind these shoddy conditions. The smells of the moldy blanket, the old, dank straw, and the confined space, plus the rusty chains that chafed her wrists and ankles. The authorities want to break me. They will fail. Naya told herself and glared at the stone wall, in front of her, daring the rough-cut rocks to challenge thoughts. I got everything I ever wanted tonight. They're proud of me, they love me, and I'll at least die on my feet. That's better than a lot of people get. Naya spoke quietly to herself, her stomach growled and she put a hand over her belly. I do kind of regret kicking that bread away though, she mumbled with a bit of mild annoyance. But that was nothing to her compared to the raw happiness of finding out that when it came down to it, my parents really do care. That thought kept her warm even in the increasingly uncomfortable prison as the days and nights rolled on in cycles of bread and water, while Naya waited for a trial that she had little real faith in. You can't be serious. There really was a dragon? Kalkar asked, raising her eyebrows in shock. A chill came over her at that. The danger dragons pose to humanity was no secret. It seemed beyond impossible for one to be in the wildlands. In front of her knelt Remedios Custodio with her head deeply bowed. Yes, my queen, we attempted to kill the beast, but the traitor must have warned it to run if she didn't come back. A dragon. Ran away, flew away? At Kalkar's side, Kelit Custodio frowned. That doesn't sound right. We questioned the collaborator along the way, she freely admitted to helping it. Remedios's face was dark and burning with righteous anger. Worse, the collaborator was sent to the wilds as a punishment for showing mercy to other demi-humans in the past. So is she a traitor, or just a sympathizer? Kelit asked, her arms crossed in front of her waist. There's no difference there, sister. Remedios clapped back. Nits make lice, mercy to their children today brings them back as warriors tomorrow. They should all be destroyed. Remedios. Kelit bit her sister's name off in retort. You know better, some people look with pity at children of any kind, not everybody can be as zealous as you are. Remedios furrowed her brow. It sounded like praise, but not quite. Why won't anyone see, these rules are there to protect all humanity. We have to kill them all or they will kill all of us. Anyone who won't do that is not one of us, but one of them. The angry hateful thought burned in her mind alongside her annoyance with what seemed, in a way she couldn't quite grasp, like backhanded praise. They're supposed to be, Remedios exclaimed and lowered her head again, the traitor is being confined in the fortress while we convene for a trial. Her parents are there. Have they sent letters? Kalkar looked up to her left. Kelit nodded. They have, my queen, I took the liberty of reading them. The sorts of pleas you would expect from parents for their child. She didn't mean to do it, she thought she was doing the right thing, she's innocent and pleading for your clemency. Kalkar, for once, did not have a beautiful expression on her face. The long white dress with the blue crest of her house on her ample chest was close-fitting enough that it did nothing to hide the heavy, thoughtful breathing of the Holy Queen on her throne. I want a kingdom where no one will cry. If I show no mercy to her, then what kingdom do I have? Queen Kalkar asked. A just one. A safe one. My queen, I love your mercy, your justice, but if we hadn't gotten there we would have a dragon loose in the northern Holy Kingdom. Remedios gasped the words out in one desperate breath, and murmurs of agreement went around. I can't show mercy here. Can I? Queen Kalkar asked rhetorically. My queen, she flaunted the law. If the law can be flaunted, you can be flaunted. If you can be flaunted, we no longer have a ruler even if you're on the throne. Kelit advised, and Kalkar bowed her head. Her parents are important people, aren't they? Kalkar asked, I know the name Braha from somewhere. With respect, Majesty, what does it matter? The collaborator is still a collaborator. Remedios trailed off at a rare fierce look from her sister. Who cares what her family is? She collaborated. She sheltered our enemy. Let her die like the traitor she is. Kelit answered the queen's question. Pavel Baraha is a member of the Nine Colors and one of the greatest archers in the kingdom. His wife is a paladin due to retire soon. Both have impressive records. I see. Queen Kalka frowned. She sat in reflection for a moment. Have them gently confined until after the trial is over. Investigate them for any similar actions, and if nothing is found. If we have to execute their child, force them both into quiet retirement far, far away. As you command, Your Majesty. Remedios answered. And, about the trial. Kalka's orders were immediate. Conduct it as fairly as you can. The Baraha house may be of the most minor nobility, but nobles are nobles. The soldiers at the wall are probably biased, so select a handful of noble sons and daughters from here, take them with you to the wall. They should be incorruptible and offset the bias from any soldiers you have on the jury. At your will, Majesty. Remedios replied at once. When the commander of the Paladin Order was gone, Kalka looked up to her dearest, closest advisor and asked, why do you think she did it? Do you really believe she intended the kingdom any harm? Kelit shrugged her shoulders. I can't say. Pity to break the heart is a dangerous thing, to the one who stays their hand and to the one behind them whom they're supposed to protect. My sister isn't very bright, but she is right about one thing. Non-humans are dangerous to humans. Kill them today or they will kill you tomorrow. It is strange though, I checked the record of the accused as soon as we had her name. It was quite impressive too. She's on path to be a true successor to her father. Not many hunt the wildlands and survive for long, but she was out there for months alone except for her check-ins. Most people who go out there for any length of time, they become zealous demi-human hunters, almost as vigorous as Remedios. This one, though, didn't. She shrugged again. You never can tell with people, I suppose. Kelit added as if that settled the matter, and as far as the crown was concerned, it did.